Okay, so you've got a character, you've made your character in MakeHuman, and now it's time to get your character into Unity. But first, we're going to get your character into Blender, animate it, and then we're going to be ready to get it into Unity. So, pay attention, because here we go. The first thing you got to do is make sure that you've got a rig. So you go to the Pose Animate tab here on your character and choose the gaming engine rig. You'll get something like this. It's not going to look exactly like this once we get into Blender, but that's okay. We'll figure that out. Then I'm going to save just one time, get that done, and I'm going to export. Now there's a lot of options here. Excuse me. But the best option for anything having to do with armatures and rigs and stuff like that is the FBX. When you used to work out of Fuse, or when I used to work out of Fuse, I don't know if you worked out of Fuse, but when I used to work out of Fuse, it didn't have a rigging option, and so we just used OBJs. But we're going to use FBX instead. So we're going to take that, got everything, basically everything should be set the way you want, and you just hit the 3 dots to make sure that it's going into the same folder as what you need it for, which should be in your assets folder in Unity, although mine is not yet, but we'll just go with this. So I'm gonna hit save. It's gonna do the export, and now the next thing I want to do is open up Blender. I should have had this open before. Sorry. So now we're going to open up Blender. First thing I'm going to do is hit X and delete the cube that's in there by default. And then I'm going to go import FBX. And he's on my desktop right now, so make human character, and there's my FBX. Comes in really small, which is ironic because in Fuse they used to come in like super huge. So I just like to do things in a relative sizing. So that's a camera, that's a light. So yeah, you know, that's about right. Somewhere in about there. The truth of the matter is, you're going to probably have to adjust the sizing once you get into Unity anyway. If you're creating multiple characters, though, just to kind of think ahead, one of the things that I might do is take a look at your scaling and then choose a nice round number. So like, you know, lock them all together, and then just do 0.60. There we go. What's the lock for? Okay, I'm still getting used to Blender here. I guess those locks don't mean anything. I don't know. I'm just using it wrong. So 0.60, and then that way, when you bring in another MakeHuman character, theoretically they should be at the same scaling option. The root bone comes in a little large, so one of the first things that I do is go into edit mode, and I'm going to grab that, go into the translate tool and grab it along the X, or the X-axis, and just make that a little smaller so it's not in the way. Get back into object mode, and yeah, there we go. So now we've got our skeleton, or our rig, we've got our character, and we're kind of ready to start animating. But there's a few things that we need to do to set this character up properly. The first thing that we want to do to set up our character properly is we're going to click on the bones here, open the viewport display, and one thing that helps me a lot is check the in front box. That's going to show you the bones all the time. Now, octahedral display is kind of annoying sometimes. I'll turn that off once I start getting to pose the character, but for now I'm going to leave it on, because what I also want to do is I want to set up my inverse kinematics. Yeah, that's it. Don't know why I forgot that, but that's what I want to do. So I'm going to click on my inverse or my bone constraints here, and you have to go into pose mode in order to do this. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take the palm bones and you're going to add inverse kinematics with a chain length of 3. Do the next one, and chain length of 3, and do the same thing on the feet. Sorry, I just got a phone call. That's why I sounded like I was distracted there. I was. So now we have a chain length of 3 on those. And the chain length is important. You can see this little dotted line here. And what that means is when you grab this bone and you start to move it, it's going to move 3 bones. So it'll start here, here, here. Now, some people might like to use the toes. I don't. I find that that's really annoying. I use the bone that's on the base foot of the character. I find that a lot easier. Now we're going to take the head bone. I'll also do this and add one with a chain length of 2 just to go down to the base of the spine. And you can kind of see how that will work. And it works pretty good. So, and then we have to do our fingertips. Okay, sorry, I had to take a phone call there. It was, yeah, so interrupted yet again. Can't ever do these things without being interrupted. So we're doing the fingers, and it's exactly the same. You're going to go and you're going to add inverse kinematics, chain length of 3, just that simple. Now, I don't think that you can add them to multiple bones at the same time, but we're going to try. You didn't used to be able to do that yeah, see, it only worked for the last one. So, yeah, you weren't able to do it back in 2.7.9 either. So I didn't, or 2.7.8 or whatever the last version was. So I didn't figure that we'd be able to do it. But, you know, it's always worth a try when you get into a new version. I'm still really, really, really new with Blender 2.8. I love it. But the learning curve is pretty steep. And, yeah, I mean, like even the left click to select has taken me weeks to stop right-clicking on things that I want to select. And I know before anybody leaves a comment, I know you can change it. I didn't want to. I want to learn the new stuff. I don't want to be an old dog that can't learn new tricks, right? Okay, so now that I've got all of these things ready to go, theoretically, and you can kind of test this in pose mode, you should be able to grab and kind of move your character around. Now, they do some funky stuff, like if you raise the arms up, like the weight painting on this is a little messed up. We're going to deal with weight painting in a different demo, but it does need some modification. MakeHuman does not do the best weight painting I've ever seen. However, unlike Fuse, if I tilt the head back or something like that, the teeth at least don't come flying out of the face. Like they did with Fuse. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with this and how it works. So now it's going to be time to go ahead and start the animation process. So let's see here. I'll go here. I like to change the bones to B bones, or oftentimes I'll go to wire. Although that makes it a little harder to grab the bones sometimes, but Blender seems to be pretty good on that. And so, you know, I just like to test it out a little bit, make sure the rig's working. The weight painting is a little frustrating, but you know what? It's always that way when you're bringing stuff in my experience. Oops. And yeah, we'll talk about that in just a second. So I'm going to pause again really quickly. I got to go grab an image that I'm going to use as a reference, and I will be right back. Okay, so I've found an image. It's got a run cycle on it. We're going to use as a reference. We're going to project it behind our character here. And this is a thing that actually 2.79 is, or 2.8 is way different than 2.7 was. As far as Blender is concerned, it took me a while to figure this out. Just be completely honest with everybody. It was a little frustrating. I kept on looking for background images and so on and so forth. So all you got to do is Shift A. And you can add an image, just like that. Except I shouldn't be in pose mode when I do it. There we go. So we're going to add an image, and we're going to add a reference image, not a background image. And actually, why don't I add a background image, and I'll show you all why we don't want to add background images. So here's my run cycle. It always comes in perpendicular to the camera, but one of the things you might want to do with this is, if you just take a look at this really quickly, let's go here to the cube, and we're going to change our rotations. So we'll go, let's see here. So rotate the X 90 degrees, and rotate the Z 90 degrees. Okay, so now I've got this, and I can scale it up so we can see it nice and big. But you'll notice that my character is facing to the left, and the animations are facing to the right, or the reference points. So what I've told my students to do is to flip it around. Well, if you set up your image, if you add it as a background image, it has like normals. So just like any other mesh object in Unity, it's one-sided. And so as soon as I try and rotate it around so that it's backwards, you can't see anything. So that does not help us. So we're going to go to a reference image. We'll load that, and it is literally exactly the same of an issue. So let's just go 90 and 90. Bring this up here and scale it up nice and big. I'm going to hit 3 on the numpad here so that my character is perpendicular. I'm just going to hit G to grab, and I'm just going to kind of move it around. Hit S to scale, G to grab, until we've got a character that is roughly the same size or we got a reference that is roughly the same size as my character. So there we go. Now, here's the one big thing. So they're facing the wrong direction, right? Okay, great. So I'm going to take my Z-axis, and I'm going to go negative 90 degrees here. That's interesting. Got a little rotation there. And then what happens to me is I always start it with this because I'm starting with the left image, right? No, I flipped it backwards. So now I have to start with the rightmost image. And you can tell this because what you want is your first one and your last one need to be the same. So you can see that these two keyframes are the same and these two are not. So what we're going to do is we're going to start animating our character in a run cycle. But first, we want to prep the file in such a way so that once we bring him into Unity, all of our animations are done as actions. So I'm going to go up here to the tabs along the top. I'm going to hit animation, and then hit the 3 key on the numpad here. And we've got our camera here, which is totally useless. In fact, I learned recently that cameras and lights now come into Unity, so we might as well just delete that. So I'm just going to delete the camera, and I'm going to I'll leave my light for now. And we're going to take this, and I'm going to change it to our to another dope sheet. And then I'm going to change that dope sheet to, well, maybe I don't have the line, so we'll keep that one here. And we're going to go to, oh yeah, that's right. So I can do that. So we're going to take the dope sheet up here, and we're going to change it to the action editor. I like this. It's a little bit better. I don't know if you put it down here. Actually, I think I like that. So I'm going to go to dope sheet here, action editor down on the bottom. Because you're going to get a long list of keyframes because each bone is going to have a keyframe, and it's going to look a little bit better. So down here, I have my my action editor, and the action editors literally are subset actions. So this one's going to be our running. So what I like to do in prepping this is I'm going to click New, and I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to call this player character running. So what I'm doing is I'm doing that because this name is what's going to be loaded into Unity. And so when you go to call animations or assign animations actually in the animation editor in Unity, you'll have a long list of names of them. And Unity comes with some preset animations and stuff that are just run cycle or running or whatever. And so sometimes it's hard to differentiate those from your animations unless you've been really careful about what you name them. So I'll say player character dash running, and then that way I know that that's the one that I want for my player character to run. So now it's just as simple as getting the character set up for each keyframe. I'm not going to do them all. I figure that you guys will be able to kind of figure out the rest. So I'm going to fast forward to the end. And in my next demo, so I'll just do 1 or 2 here, and then in my next demo where we actually finish our Blender file and bring it into Unity, I'll deal with a couple other things about the animation process and just, you know, like prepping it for Unity. But essentially, this is it. So the first thing I want to do, and let me also say this, I have to give Blender a nice kind of kudos because they, when in old Blender, when you used to rotate around your object, the background image would disappear. It would only work when you were flat on. And that was always really frustrating to me. So this is really nice. So to prep this, we're going to click on the bones. I'm going to go to pose mode. Oh, and then I can grab an individual bone and I can kind of set this down and kind of get his hands ready. Nobody runs like that with their fingers. And now I'm running out of scroll. Shift C is what usually is supposed to that's what's supposed to like set your zoom. There we go. So if you find that you're running out of scrolling and you hit Shift Z and you still can't scroll in, notice what I did is I turned off the empty. And so what Blender, I almost said Unity, what Blender does is it sets your scrolling based upon the entire scene. That actually really frustrates me. In Unity, when you hit the F key and it sets your scrolling amounts and your distances and stuff like that, it sets it to the size of the object that you have selected. In Blender, it sets it to the way that the scene is. So if you want to zoom in on an object, it seems as if, and I could be wrong about this, and if I am, we'll leave the correct option in the comments. But you see, if I hit Shift C here, it zooms way out, and then I kind of run out of scrolls as I get closer to the character. But if I turn the empty off, the reference image off, and then hit Shift C, notice it zooms me in, and now I've got a better scrolling distance. That's a really frustrating thing. So anyway, so I'm just gonna grab let's grab some of the fingers here, and when you grab them from this view and you're not using like the rotate tool or something, realize that they will rotate and grab parallel to the camera angle. So it's actually really important that you've got a good camera angle when you are kind of trying to position the fingers. Because if you don't, if you got a whacked out camera angle, see, they start to rotate a little weird on you sometimes. And now I'll just go and kind of do something like this. And so I'll just try and use a combination of the grab tool with inverse kinematics and the actual rotate tool to kind of allow me to get a little closer. The rotate indicator / icon thingamajiggy keeps getting in the way. It's kind of frustrating. Click off, click back on, get that back in there. There we go. So we're making inroads. Now, if your character is holding some kind of a weapon or something like that, you might want to curl your fingers in more. You want to think ahead if you're going to do that. If you have a weapon that's already built, you probably want to maybe bring it into your model and check on it. I did not do inverse kinematics on this one. Oh, well, I'm glad I figured that out now rather than after I'd started animating a lot. And the thumb can always be a little bit harder to deal with sometimes just cause it is. No other reasons other than the fact that it just is. And you can, have some fun rotating the bones a little bit in different ways. And yeah, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to leave that's the right hand. We'll leave him like he's grasping something, and then this one we'll just do a little bit differently. Just a little bit flexed. Not like he's grabbing anything, but just more like, he's running, but he's not holding his hands in a fist, but he's definitely running and has those kind of relaxed hands there. There we go. And then I'll fix any awkward rotations here like this. Forefinger might need to be And you might think, well, why are you doing this? It's not even anything having to do with the run. Well, yeah, you're right. But at the same time, it gives me the ability to get started on my character's run really easily, because you want to do the fingers first, because they're basically going to stay in the same position the entire time. That pinky finger is kind of rotated a little weird here. Let's bring that in like this. There we go. That's better. Let's check the other one really quickly. That one's doing a lot better. Okay, so we're pretty ready to go. I might rotate the wrist just a little bit like this, and that looks good. Okay, so now we're ready to start animating the character. One of the other things that might come up is like, well, I wanted to like add boots or shoes or whatever to my character, and I didn't even think about that. So my character's barefoot here, and that's all legitimate, and that's good. You can actually add those almost at any point in time in the process, with a few exceptions. But like, we can animate this character and then decide we want to give him a cape or boots or whatever, and just parent them to the armature, and it's just going to work really well. And speaking of that, that actually makes me think of one other thing. I'm going to take the armature here and I'm going to rename it. So it's Game Engine right now, and I'm just going to call this player character Bones. And the reason why I like to do that is because once you get into Unity, it's kind of nice to be able to identify the different objects and whatnot once you add your prefabs. And you'll see that underneath that are listed all of your mesh objects that are parented to the armature that we're using. So now it's time. We're going to turn our empty back on here, hit the 3 key, and now it's time to start posing our character. So the first one here is the upper arm. Now how you pose, here's what I like to do. I like to grab the palm, and I will hit grab, and I'll kind of start to move it. But I find that a lot of times it's easiest to just kind of bring that up like this, and I'll just kind of ignore the IK for a large portion of my animations when I'm working with very specific keyframes like this. If I was doing something that was a little bit more interpretive, I don't know if that's really the word that I would use, but something along those lines, then maybe I wouldn't. But in this case, I would. So a lot of it just depends on what you want to do with, or how you like to animate. Everybody kind of gets their own stuff and gets their own animation. So I'm going to lean him forward a little bit here. And then I'm going to, now we got to position the legs. So this front leg here, oops, click off, and click the front leg, and I'll just rotate it back a little bit like that. Click here, rotate that like that, and then click on this main foot bone, and we'll just do that. And then we're going to grab this, and we're going to put it forward. And you get the idea. It's really pretty simple. And now it looks like the toe is just touching the ground. So this is where one of those times where I'm just going to take my bone, I'm going to take the move tool, and I'm going to bring him down like this so his toe is kind of right on the ground there. I find it's actually really, really handy to set up your reference, especially if it has this up and down bob kind of a thing. You want to set it so that the feet are on the ground. And actually, as I say that, and I'm looking at it, these feet are on the ground here, but these are in the air. So I made an error there. So I'm going to lift him back up in the air, and then we're going to, so that he's like actually in the air here. And now we're going to set this keyframe as our first keyframe for the run cycle. So I'm going to select all, and then I'm going to hover over the character in the 3D window, and I'm going to hit I, which is for insert a keyframe. And I'm going to go down here to whole character. And then you see all of a sudden a whole big bunch of things happen. You've got your dope sheet here, and you can see every single bone that's in there, and it's so nice. MakeHuman names them for you, which is wonderful. And then here you have your summary action for your action under the action editor, and we can actually totally close that. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is we know we're in the right action for this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, once I've done that, I'm going to get out of pose mode. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to kind of set this up so that he's kind of right on the thing, and I can't really see. If I go to wireframe, I won't be able to see it. Let's go to, no, see, that's frustrating. The X-ray doesn't allow me to see through an image. I just wanted to see where my 0 marker is, but I'm feeling like it probably is about right there. I'm just going to visually go across this, and let's move it here. Yeah, that looks good, because my crosshairs here is still right at the 0, 0, 0 mark, so that actually worked out very well. So GY to grab, and there my feet are going to be right on that 0 mark. Okay, cool. So we've got our first keyframe, but he's a little high now, so I'm going to make some adjustments to that keyframe, which is really easy to do. So I'm going to do that on purpose so that you guys see that. So I need to bring this leg up a little bit, so I'm going to click on that leg. We'll go to our rotate tool, and I'm just going to rotate that a little bit more. And then I'm going to bring him down a little bit more by grabbing the bone right at the base of the pivot of the pelvis, and I'm going to bring that down. And in fact, what I probably should have done is I probably should have brought the root bone up and down. Yeah, I wonder how that will work. Let's see. We'll do the root bone. So now I'm going to bring the root bone up. And now to replace the existing keyframe, I make sure I'm still at 1, which I am. So the playhead here is, or the time is set to all those keyframes right on top. And I'm going to select all again and insert a keyframe over top of it. So now I've reinserted my next keyframe. Once I do that, I go forward 5 frames, just like this, to 5. I'm going to take my reference here. I'm going to go GY. I'm going to grab it. Oh, see, I'm in pose mode. That's weird. It allows you to do pose mode for a reference image. It's a little strange. GY, I'm going to bring this over. And then what I like to do is I like to have the pose in front of my character so that I can see better what I'm doing. So now I'm going to go back, click on my armature again, and go back into pose mode. And now I can go in here and start to make some changes to the pose. So let's go rotate. I can rotate that up a little bit like that. Bring the foot back a little bit here like that. The right leg is coming down a little bit. In fact, it almost looks like, yeah, and the heel is ready to strike. So we're gonna, or is striking the ground, so we'll pull the heel up like that. And then we're gonna bring in our arm a little bit here. And then this one is also a little different. Click on that and bring that down like so. Select all, insert another keyframe. And you're just going to keep going. You're just going to keep going until you get to the last keyframe. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to hit pause now. I'm going to do this. I'm just going to do each keyframe, and then I'll come back to you and show you what you need to do with the last frame. So I'm not going to do anything with that. I'll just show you what needs to happen, and we'll go from there. Actually, I decided to come back and show you something. So one of the things you got to be careful about with this is you've got to set your keyframes ahead of time, because or at least, okay, let's see if this works, because it worked in 2.7.9. This is the way it worked. I don't know about 2.8, but I think if I move my timeline here, if I move the playhead on the timeline, it's going to get rid of my animation. Yep, it did. So one of the things that's really important, because I did this a bunch of times, I forgot to move my playhead off of my previous keyframe. So I finished my second keyframe. I'm like all excited. I'm going to go animate, you know. And then I would start changing, and I'd go, oh crap, like if I do keep doing this and I hit I, I'm gonna save over top of the keyframe that I want to keep. And so, you know, I would have my body changed like this, and then I'd go, oh crap, and then I would go and I'd move forward, and it snaps back to the way it was. which kind of stinks. So you always have to remember to move the timeline forward before you start to animate your character. That's actually really important. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going here and do this. Maybe I'll just do a little time lapse here. Oh, okay. So now we're at the last one. So here's a really important little tip slash trick. It's not really a trick because it's so easy. I just hesitate to even call it a trick. So your last keyframe needs to be the same as your first keyframe. However, here's part of the problem. And I guess it just depends on how well you really want to do this. So you can try and make the pose perfectly the same, but it will never be the same. So in Unity, when the cycle loops back to the first keyframe, there'll be this little jolt, because in one frame, 1/30th of a second, okay, it's going to jerk a little bit because you will never get the poses the same, ever. No matter what you try to do, just not going to happen. So the easiest thing to do is to right-click again. Haven't done that in a while. You're going to select the first keyframe, and then you're going to hit Shift-D to duplicate it, and then you drag it out like that. And so now you can see your character is going to actually have a nice run cycle. Okay. And actually, he's not bobbing as much. I'm not 100% happy with this actually, and the root bone bounces up and down. That was my fault. Like I should never have started with that. So like the root bone is up for 2 keyframes, and it's not good actually. So let me take the. Oh, this is gonna stink. So if I take the root bone and bring him down, I moved the root bone and then realized that that was the wrong move. Literally, whoa, that is not what I wanted to do. I'm gonna bring him up again like this. Ah, my bad. And redo that keyframe like that. There, he looks like he's about right in the right air. So I'm going to select all, I'm going to hit insert and just do that again, and then we'll go to the next keyframe and the same thing's going to happen. But I think after that we should be good. So I'm going to bring the root bone down, grab his hips, bring him up like that, select all, and hit I, and now I've saved over top of those. So the root bone should stay until the last one. So we're going to take this last one, I'm going to select it again, X, delete that keyframe, go back to my first one, Shift D, and bring it all back. So now everything's nice and smooth. Okay. And that up and down motion will actually allow you to have a little bit of head bob when you are when you're running in Unity. We'll attach our camera to the head bone if we want to, and that'll give you the head bob if you want to. He should be bobbing twice, and so that's my problem. Is he comes down, and then here he only goes up a little bit. He probably should go up a little bit more there for that second little bit. So I would go and move his hips up and do that, but I'm not going to bother with that because I don't want to take too much time with the demo. You've been patient enough as it is. So now, here's the one thing that's going to happen with this though, and this is the problem. If you have the same keyframe here and on frame number 1, and then the same keyframe at frame 55, 2 things have happened because of this. Number 1, I've separated every single keyframe by 5, except this first one because because it starts at 1, so therefore that's 4 in there. So that first set of 5 is actually going to be a little bit too fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this to 56. I'm going to hit the B key, which is B for box, I guess. Grab all of those, hit G, and bring them over 1 frame. Boom. Now I've got 5 frames from between each one. Okay, so that speed will be consistent. But now I've got another problem, and that is this. I have 2 frames that are the same, so when it hits the end of the loop and it goes back to the beginning, there'll be a slight stutter, a pause. Why? Because I'm going to have 2 frames that are actually identical. So I'm going to go back to 55 now, which is just 1 frame in. See, 1 frame in, like that. I'm going to select all, insert a keyframe. I'm just using the tween that it's doing to create a keyframe, and then I'm going to X and delete what was 55. So now when it loops, it's looping 1 frame before the ending keyframe, which is the same as the first keyframe, and you won't have a stutter. And that's actually a really important little tip that I could give you if you're experiencing a little stutter in your run cycle because it seems to pause. It's probably, if it's a subtle one, it's probably happening at the end of the cycle when it's looping back to the beginning because those 2 keyframes are the same. Eliminate that, and now you have a much smoother run cycle. Want to prove it to yourself? We can actually we can play. So I'm going to take my animation here. I'm going to start it at 1. I'm going to end it at 55. Okay, and then I'm just going to, let's turn off our empty, and then we're going to test our run cycle here just by hitting play. So I'm going to start at 1, and I'm going to hit play. Boom. So now if I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at my frames per second and how fast he's going, he's running a little slow. But one thing that I forgot is Blender's original or default is 25 frames per second. So let's stop that, set it up for 30, hit play again. Now he's running a little faster, but it's still not quite as fast as I'd like. If this was an animation, I would probably go in and compress the keyframes and all that sort of stuff, which is actually pretty easy to do. However, Unity allows you to speed up animations very simply in there. So I'm just going to leave it be, call it good enough, and then I can actually do that in Unity. So now I've got a great start for all my animations. So I've got a run cycle. Maybe my next one is a walk cycle. So once you're ready to do another animation, what you need to do is you need to do that second animation as a second action. So I'm going to hit a new action. And what's interesting about it is it duplicates what you were on. Actually, oh, that's frustrating. Oh, my running one doesn't have anything because I was in the wrong action. Interesting. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to delete that action. Go back to Bones action. Why is it still... Oh, they did this in the previous stuff where it wouldn't delete it until you were gone. So we're going to take that and we'll call it walking. We'll just get that. We'll use running as walking. Okay. And then we're going to take Bones action here. This is going to be our running one. So you always gotta kind of be careful with what you're doing because, man, I tell you what, it is frustrating sometimes with the action editor. But you're gonna have a whole series of actions now. So if I'm ready for a walk cycle, I'll select this one. I've got a brand new slate. I will start on number 1. I'll bring in a walk cycle reference just like I did the run cycle reference, and I'll do all my keyframes exactly the same way. I will have an idle animation where my character is just standing there. You know, depending upon what you need in the game, maybe they're holding a weapon out, ready to shoot. Maybe they're not. That all just depends upon your game. You might have a jumping animation and a dying animation, or a falling animation, or an animation for when you get hit. All those things. One thing I do notice, oh man, that weight painting is just awful. One thing I did notice about this though is his arm is kind of stuck out a little bit. He's like a chicken. So I would definitely go back into my running and I would go for each keyframe, I would go into pose mode and I'd tuck that arm in. So it's really important to like evaluate your run cycle from multiple different angles. I animated him from one angle. Remind me later. You know, so now I forgot what I was saying. Stupid Windows. Anyway, that's really annoying. So anyway, yes, I know. Virus and threat protection. Oh my gosh. Go away. All this stuff. Yeah. What happened? Why? Notifications. Go away. It's really annoying. So anyway, we'll just finish this up. I'd bring the arm in, redo each keyframe, select all, reinsert a keyframe over top of that with the arm tucked in so he doesn't look like a chicken while he's running. And then we have to go in and we have to change some of this weight painting because, oh, that's awful. And I'll do another demonstration on how to change weight painting. I actually already have a couple on my channel about weight painting in Blender, specifically having to do with importing fuse characters into Unity or Blender for use with Unity, but really the principles are identically the same. We just need to smooth that out a little bit and things will go much better for us. So anyway, yeah, just evaluate your run cycle from all sorts of different angles as you're going through it. He's also walking like his legs are really widespread, so I would probably bring those in too and get the animation to look a lot better. You also want to evaluate and make sure that he's not going through his own skin. Yeah, there he is. So that thumb is going through the shirt. So I would have to bring the arm out a little bit so that didn't happen. That's really frustrating too. But you just gotta have to evaluate each keyframe, make sure everything's working. If it's not, you go back over the keyframe. So let's say here, you know, where the hand is going through like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this. I'll probably have to do 2 keyframes here. So I'll select these here. I'll click this, and I'm just going to hit the G key. I'm going to bring that out like that. Select all. Insert a new keyframe right over top of the existing one, and then when it goes to here, we'll do the exact same thing. Just hit G, grab, bring that out. I might even try and rotate the wrist. What I'll do is I'll go from global to local coordinates and just rotate the wrist a little bit so the thumb's more up. Select all, insert another keyframe, and then I'll just test it between those two. And it's still there. I think I need to rotate the wrist here too, just to get that hand back the way it should be. Select all, insert whole character. I've now saved over top of that keyframe. You get the idea. Okay, it's pretty easy to do once you get the hang of things. It's also pretty easy to screw up too, so pay attention to what you're doing. So anyway, hopefully this will help you get some animations set up. Don't forget to separate them with the action editor into different things, into different actions, because once we go into to Unity, you're going to want to have those actions separated out because the animations import into Unity so much better when they're separate actions as opposed to when they're all in one big timeline, which I've done before, and it's not a big deal. You can tell Unity to use just certain keyframe sets and animate with those only, or call those only in the animation controller in Unity, but at the same time it's just that much harder. So here you've got something that's going to help you not have to do that. And you know, again, with the future demo, when we bring this guy into Unity, we'll talk about that. Hopefully this helped you out. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If you want to see more of this stuff, click subscribe, give it a like. If you think I did something wrong, or if I made a technical mistake or something like that, please let me know. And hopefully that'll, yeah, hopefully this helped you out. Have a good night. Take care.